an injury can lead to athletes being more susceptible to like anxiety, depression. Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Do you think you felt any of those as you were going along?
All of the above.
We're strong.
We are resilient.
We are competitive.
We are the best.
The best.
The best.
The best at our specific sport.
We are under pressure constantly.
We are student athletes.
But we are human.
We need your help.
For any athlete who gets injured, it always feels like it's the end. They're not the same person that they were. They're not going to be the same player. And the worst part about it is that there's nothing that they can do.
I had a foot injury that led to me injuring my lower back. Since then, I've had 5 of the same kind of injuries to my lower back.
Broke my leg, and then a couple months later, I got a bone infection, required another minor operation, an open wound on my scar where I had the surgery, which I had to get treated every single day. And I actually had an IV put into my arm that was there for like 6 weeks, just inside my arm.
I had a shoulder impingement. I was diagnosed with blood clots, and then ended up having to remove my first rib. 1 in my neck, and then like 2 throughout my arm.
Had pain in my back. Later realized it was a sacral stress fracture. I thought I had been in a car accident, actually, because it was so severe.
Last year, I developed 3 stress fractures in my right foot.
I ended up tearing the labrum in my hip. I retore it, so in my rehab process, so I'm probably gonna have to get surgery again on it.
I was injured at least a portion of every season except for my freshman season, which I redshirted, so didn't really matter. Torn labrum. The next season, I want to say concussion and a torn meniscus, but then I broke my jaw. I've had a lot of knee surgeries.
I've had 6 surgeries on my left knee.
Kyphosis in my lower back.
I collapsed in the court last year, and I found out that I had atrial flutter, which is a rhythm problem in your heart.
I tore my ACL. I had a Lisfranc tear, and then I had a herniated disc in my back.
When I was a sophomore, I tore my LCL in my right knee, and I had to get reconstructive surgery. And then I came back from that, and I ruptured my right quad, so my whole rectus femoris kind of exploded. And then I retore it coming into my senior year.
I tore my UCL in my elbow. I was a bit of a rare case because my UCL was literally in 2 pieces. It was completely in half.
Any injury is really catastrophic for an athlete. Depending on the severity, sometimes depicts how the feelings are. And a lot of times the sport is what takes athletes away from their heads or thinking about their injury or these negative thoughts that creep in when they have an injury. The hardest part about being injured when you're an athlete is not having that sport anymore to relieve some of that stress.
I was a mess.
So the biggest factor in me was mentally overcoming it.
Did you ever get angry at yourself over this time for being injured?
Yeah, like the whole time.
Getting injured in general throws a huge wrench in everything else that you do, because from that point on, everything you're doing, you're thinking, okay, how is this affecting my injury? How is it helping it? How is it making it worse?
I have felt a whole host of emotions.
It hits you emotionally, mentally.
You kind of start blaming the negatives on the fact that you're in pain. But I was feeling it a lot, so I couldn't stop thinking about it, so that definitely affected my game.
When you add an injury to that, there's not just the physical fatigue of it, but there's definitely also the mental aspect of adding just one more thing.
There were times I cried in the shower.
I just don't feel like seeing people and having people ask, what happened? When do you get out of the boot? Are you okay? So I really isolated myself, and it just weighed really heavy on my spirit, and I was do I even want to do this anymore?
I guess my emotional stability was a little off.
Especially as an athlete, it changes your whole structure of your life.
Being injured, you feel like half a person.
All the athlete wants to do is perform. So I think there's a feeling of insignificance.
And it was about 2 a.m. and I was sitting in front of my locker crying on the phone with my mom.
I don't know, I was just lonely,
But it is depressing. It's just you put all this work into this one thing your whole entire life, and then you finally get to college, which is what you were trying to do your whole entire life, was get your education paid for. In your first year, you can't.
Basically, it was essentially like I had nothing left to give to just like the rest of the world.
If you're in pain in that moment, you're like, I don't feel like doing calculus. Like, I feel like going to bed.
The mental side of a student athlete's injury is almost harder than the physical side. The mental side, every day changes. Every day is a different struggle. Every day is a different battle. And sometimes athletes need somewhere to go that's not their parents, that's not their teams, to just talk and figure out what's going on.
In sports, when people get hurt, like they're going to go through highs and lows, and it's important to be around people who like understand that. And
race was like one of the best races I've ever been in, and I like told my I'm gonna get upset. But then I would also say it was the worst because at the end of the race I knew I couldn't get out by myself, and like that had never happened before. So then went back to Matt after the race, and he was like, and I was like upset, and he was like, you swam so fast, like you had such a great split, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. So like that was also hard.
I had a really low moment, to the point where my parents like made me go see someone.
The lowest point I had with my injuries is riding back in the car with the trainer. I remember after my list rank, I actually cried.
I'm having to call my coaches and like tell my team sucked. And then senior year when I tore it again, that was the worst.
It got to a point where like I had to go to Caps. I had to like take other precautions to like see people to like talk about this because it just wasn't healthy. And
The hardest part for a student athlete most of the time is admitting that there's something wrong and going to somebody about their problem. A lot of times it's really hard to differentiate between normal tiredness and sadness and a mental problem. So sometimes we don't want to talk about our problems. We don't want to have pity. We don't want to have anybody comfort us or baby us. We just want to be better. And with mental illness, that's really hard, especially with people who work really, really hard every single day and push themselves to absolute limits every single day. They don't know what the difference is between a mental illness and what's tired or normal fatigue of playing a sport.
If your mom didn't tell you to go, do you think you would have gone?
no, I wouldn't have gone.
And it's difficult for athletes in general to come to terms if they are depressed or they're experiencing severe anxiety because they're expected to perform well in the classroom and on the competition field.
If you're around people that aren't athletes, it's kind of difficult to talk about because it's hard for other people to understand kind of how big of a role our sport is in our life.
Student athletes like won't tell people if they're hurt or if they're like going through something. They'll just kind of like push it like aside and just keep trying to keep going.
The real step for me, the hardest part was asking someone for help and admitting that I needed it.
I think an athlete is the first person to say, Coach, I'm good. So they know that when they admit to it or when they ask for help, that there's the likelihood that they're going to get, not necessarily pulled, but that there's that chance that they can't be playing with it or they shouldn't be.
They don't want to come off as weak.
I guess like people wouldn't look as like a sports injury as something you would go get help for in terms of talking to someone and stuff like that.
Assuming that student athletes muster up the courage to go and tell somebody about their injury, there always seems to be some sort of repercussion from it. And when I say repercussion, I don't mean like a punishment, but I mean like we let somebody down, our parents are sad, our team is sad, we're sad. There's always something that happens because of it. So it's really hard to get somebody to tell somebody else about their mental illness or how their injury is affecting them.
Did you feel like you would have let your team down if you didn't play?
Absolutely.
I just felt like I wasn't contributing to the team in the way that I should be, and I wasn't living up to the expectation that not only I had set for myself, but also what the coaches had expected me to do.
I felt really bad because like at the time like I was a part of like relays that really needed me for A10.
Letting my family down, not in an aspect of playing, but an aspect of scholarship. Women's lacrosse is not a fully funded sport. Not playing, I didn't get the chance to increase my scholarship, and my parents are still paying like quite a bit of tuition to go here.
Everything I go through on a baseball field, my parents emotionally experience to an extent as well.
That positive and happy feeling that you get when you're playing on the field and that freedom that you have running around or doing whatever you do is just stripped away when you're injured. And a lot of times it affects us more than we even think. And athletes are rational people. We don't want to bring the rest of our teammates down with us when we have a problem or if we have an injury, or especially if we have something wrong with us mentally. So it's really hard to get athletes to tell other teammates or even coaches or anybody about anything that's going on mentally when they don't really even know how to handle it either.
I felt as if it was difficult for others to understand my pain.
If you're injured, you get treated differently, like 100%. That's just kind of how it is.
It's something that's tough to talk about because you don't want to, when you're around your teammates, you don't want to be talking about your injury because they've got competition and practice to be worrying about.
Getting hurt in the middle of that and knowing that maybe if I wasn't hurt, we might have been able to win like the conference championship game or something like that. That definitely it took a big toll on me. I thought about it a lot.
I runned over here and you're just like over here.
And really having to distance myself from what my team does, not really knowing what kind of role I play on the team anymore.
It kind of felt like they didn't really know where to put me or where to think of me after the injury.
That's the crappy part. Like you go to practice with everyone else, go lift with everyone else, then you have 3 hours of rehab, and then doctor's appointments, and then classes. So it's all, you put more time in, and you get less of the reward, which really sucks.
When I lost sports, I lost all of my friends at the time, or it felt like that.
But most of my teammates have never even seen me play. They don't even know what I look like on the field.
Because it's difficult telling people on the team and family members, this is what the training room is for. The trainers are our first line of defense, and they're always here for us, and this is where we spend most of our time if we're injured.
My entire day is based around the trips to the training room.
Trainer is the first line of treatment. Like, they're there to help you.
Like injuries, it took up way more time than just normal practice.
Almost 4 hours a day I was in there.
I probably did about an hour to an hour and a half of treatment each day. I also had to go to PT 3 times a week.
I don't even know how long I've spent in the training room.
I got to the point where even if I wasn't injured, I just was in the training room.
I still have to show up to every single lift, practice, meeting, film, and then on top of that, I have to be doing physical therapy.
Going through surgery, it was class, then I'd go to the training room for like a little bit of stuff, and then go back to my next class, and then I would show up, do the training room for more treatment, then go to practice, sit there on the sides in a sling, not do anything, and then a lot of times I would just be there waiting and then go back in the training room.
Like one of the things about this campus is it's super hard to get around when you're injured.
It's like I was trying to heal an injury, so I don't want to be crutching around on the other leg too much, but I needed to eat and I needed to get to class and to practice in the morning.
With my back, that it's really difficult to carry around a backpack. Unfortunately, for most of my classes, it's a necessity.
Getting on crutches again, that was just so mentally challenging and demoralizing, honestly. It's like a very not handicap accessible campus.
So having to rely on someone all the time or just not eating lunch because you're like, you know what, I really don't want to have to try to recruit someone to come help feed me. Like you just want to make a sandwich and you can't.
Because I mean, I was in a sling and a brace and I couldn't write, I couldn't take notes.
One of my classrooms was on the 3rd floor of North Court last year, and there was no elevator or anything for me to get up there, so I was literally hopping on one leg up the stairs.
Not a whole lot of parking lots on this campus. Elevators. I had one class on the 5th floor of Ryland, so that was 5 flights of stairs.
Other student athletes get hurt who don't necessarily have the funds to be able to get a golf cart if you need one.
This is one day I was just like rushing, trying to get to class, and I like fell off my scooter. The golf cart looks like really amazing and helpful, but a couple $100 for a certain amount of time. Some people just don't have money to do that.
One more. So that is an accurate representation of what injured student athletes have to do going to their rooms or going to class. Yeah. So this golf cart would be really nice to have for student athletes who are injured, especially with knee injuries or any type of leg injury. It's really nice because you can stick your leg out. You can stick your leg out here. But honestly, it's just too expensive. It's around $100 per week. So if you have an ACL injury and you can't walk on it for 3-4 weeks, it's $300, $400 that we don't have. In general, being injured and being a student athlete and having the stress of class and teammates and dynamics with coaches and playing time and family members. There's a lot of stress that builds on student athletes. When you put a mental illness in with everything else that they're doing, it's really hard and it creates a whole new level of stress. Today, there's a stigma behind mental health. It really doesn't help the athlete feel comfortable being able to confront this mental illness or whatever they're going through. So it's really important that we get the news out there that it's not a stigma and that you shouldn't be ashamed of it. It's something that happens, and especially because it is so common when you're injured in athletics, it needs to be addressed right away as soon as possible. You don't have to be tough and strong all the time. Things happen.
Do you think that there is a stigma behind like mental health and depression?
Oh, for sure.
I was really just kind of upset and really depressed about it because I was having some success and playing, and just having that taken away, like it really just brought me down. I went from such like a high to such a low.
You can see the cast, you can see the crutches, you can see the boot. If you have depression or anxiety, it's a lot more difficult to see.
Being a student athlete, you have additional pressures on top of everyday life pressures. I just really was just lost, like, where do I fit in the world?
I could not work out at all. It was like that for about like 6 to 7 months, which I would say affected my mental health. I mean, I know plenty of girls on our team that would say they've gone through depression, anxiety, all of the above.
Athletes in general are so self-motivated. You think you can do anything or overcome anything.
And it really is playing a role in how you're acting and how you're playing. It's affecting more than you realize. It affects your social life. It affects how you're playing. It affects your school. It affects everything.
So I associate being an athlete with fun, and I haven't had fun in a while. We're super blessed to be here. We're blessed to be able to play a collegiate sport. I wouldn't have probably been able to afford the school without soccer. I don't know, you don't feel complete until you're better. You have like an identity crisis.
There's certainly a stigma behind mental health, and it's pretty sad because even the people that probably think that they're the most healthy would benefit from psychological help. We have 4 years here. You want to max it out. They're competitive by nature, so they don't like to wait around. It's certainly annoying for them to have to wait for them to heal.
I think there's a pride involved. I'm positive folks that have been injured have gotten full-fledged depression. It's not fulfilling for me to have my teammate fill my role.
Well, constantly being in pain is another thing that I have to think about. It's like basketball in school, so you just have to sit there and watch. You do get kind of anxious.
I think mental illnesses aren't handled very well as student athletes. They're almost portrayed as physical injuries where it's going to get better with time.
Especially with athletes, at times people see it as a sign of weakness.
The culture of being an athlete is play through the pain. If you say, I feel sad today, or, I'm feeling depressed, or I'm anxious about everything that's happening, or I'm scared about my leg, that comes off as weakness. If you're broken inside, on the inside mentally, then nobody can really see that. Nobody can experience what you're experiencing unless they've been there themselves. Because my mental health was just as important as my physical health, but they're on such different pedestals.
There are only 25 Division I schools that have a full-time licensed mental health practitioner in athletics as of January 2014. And I think that Richmond should probably do something about that in their own campus.
I think that as soon as an athlete becomes injured, that they should be in contact with some type of sports psychologist.
Just more conversations with my coaches. I feel like when I got injured, outside of my sprint coach, like my head coaches didn't talk to me.
I think it would have helped for sure to have people who had been through what I'd been through to be able to talk to, just to understand that maybe, after a big injury, it doesn't mean the end of your career or the end of who you were, or any of these questions that, are arising, or finding ways to cope with it.
I mean, Caps is like a building this big for the entire school, so that's kind of hard.
To any of my other athletes that are watching this, just know that you're not alone, and people go through this every single day. And all of the other student athletes are here for you, and we want you to feel better, and we want you to be better, and we want you to be the best version of yourself. So please reach out, tell somebody, talk to somebody. You're not a burden, don't feel like that. And injuries happen, and you can't do anything about that. So you can't feel but so bad. So you are strong, don't worry, everything's gonna be okay.
Just remember that it's always worth it, like going through all the rehab, waking up every morning, not being able to compete, seeing your teammates compete, even if it's just for that little bit of competition you can get, it's the best feelings ever. Never give up.
It's not just one sport, it's not just one gender. This is a nationwide problem that's affecting all student athletes everywhere. And I think that Richmond, as well as a lot of other Division I, Division II, Division III schools need to address and need to have a better understanding of, as athletes, we go through different things, we go through different struggles, we have different pressures, and we have different worries that normal students don't and other people around campuses don't understand. So we need to be understood on that level, and we need to have more people who are willing to understand us at that level. To everybody who helped me out, all of my athletes who were interviewed, Matt Moretti, thank you for helping me put this video together. Thank you, Professor Mays. Thank you, Kylie, for being my partner through this project. Thank you, everybody involved. Roll Spides.